So we discussed Chticha Nasas Nevela, which means that the heter, the Isser, that went into heter, that Isser grew up till 59.9 times. So if the Isser fell into 40, the Isser grew to 40, and now to be vatal, you need to have 2400, which is also 60 times 40. We discussed that Chticha Nasas Nevela doesn't make any sense, really, apisvara, except for Basar Bechalav, where there the actual Basar became the Isser, once the Chalav aser it. Masha'inkin, however, the other Yisurim, it doesn't make any sense to say Chticha Nasas Nevela. And the only reason why the Chachamim did so, according to the Ashkenazi Sherabeinu Tam's opinion, is for whatever reason the Chachamim decided to equalize all the halachas. But in reality, it doesn't make any sense, correct? Okay. Then we went through two klolim. Went through klal number 1, which is the klal of a metzias, that ein isur balo haylech mechaticha lechaticha baloret, which means that once you have an isur, we're just recapping, that was nivla in a chaticha, the tam that went into that chaticha, the taste that's in that chaticha will never leave without reitiv. What will leave without reitiv if it's hot? The thing itself. So for example, we discussed if you have a potato that was beleya chazer treif, and it became treif, and you put it boiling hot on this table or on another potato, it's mutter the bottom one. Because what's coming out of the top potato? Potato. The isur that's in it is not coming out. Because it's a klal. Ein isur balo haylech mechaticha lechaticha baloret. That's the metzias. Question I asked was, l'chayre, the potato became nevela. If you're Rabbeinu Tam and you're an Ashkenazi, the potato became nevela, correct? And once the potato became nevela, who cares if the oyser, the isur that's in it, is not going out? But the potato itself should aser. And we answered a klal. Ein hanesar oyser, ela b'mokim sha'isur atzme yochal, which means you only say chaticha nasas nevela as long as the oyser, the thing that made it osir, is together with the thing that became nevela. But if you can separate them, for example, how do you separate? You can never get an isur out of a chaticha, but you can get heter out of a chaticha. So if I have a potato that will belay a treif, can I get the treif out of it? Never. Can I get heter only out of this chaticha? Yes. We know that. It's kilo boil yo'anav yizochal atoiv and told us that. Ubemele, you could say that it's not going to aser. Okay? Give me a second. Okay, that's what we were holding. That's where we finished. The source and the yesod of these two klolim is the Gemara. The Gemara says that if you have a tap chaticha that was belei acholov, the Gemara says if you did nothing, the whole pot is mutter. If you did nothing. Why? The Gemara says because mivla bola, the top piece was belei acholov, miflat loy polit, no cholov comes out. Since no cholov comes out, it doesn't aser at all. The basar became nevela, and the basar should aser everything else. Ein hanesar oiser ela b'mokim she'isar atzma yochal leilech. And since the cholav is not going, the cholav can't aser anymore. Okay. Now, that's the second klal. Now we're going to move on to another klal. What happens if the oiser is going? Do we still say chticha nasas nevela that will transform the thing that became nevela to be an independent isur, for example? Okay, and many of you figured this out already because you learned the Tosfos properly or in the Ran. Okay, and if not, pay attention. If you hold a Rabbi Yehuda, a min b'min elay bottle, correct? So a piece of chazer fell into a bucket of hot water. What's the din? If there's no shishim, what happens to everything? Comes osir, and not just osir, chaticha nasas nevela. It's all treif. Yeah, you took a spoon of water. What's in the spoon of water? Only water or also chazer a little bit? Chazer, you can't separate, right? It's not a piece. So in the spoon, there's a little bit of chazer plus water, yeah? And I put this water into other water. According to Rabbi Yehuda, is it bottle b'shishim or not? Is it min b'minoi or is it min b'she'enei minoi? That's the question. If you separate the isur and the heter, I know it can't aser, but it's not separated. It's takya there. The oyser, the chazer is going into the second pot together with the water. Does the water become nevela or not? That's the question. Yeah. In other words, do we say chaticha nasas nevela that will transform the heter to become a new metzias or not? If you separate the two, it b'chal doesn't aser. That's the second klal. But what if it is going? What if it is chaticha nasas nevela? Does it operate like treifa water, or does it operate like treifa chazer? What will be the difference? Is it bottle b'shishim? If you say it's treifa water, then what's Rabbi Yehuda going to paskin? It's water and water. Min b'minei filu be'alaf bottle. It's not going to be bottle. But if you're going to tie it that the water didn't become treifa water, it's only treifa chazer. So since chazer is bottle b'shishim, so the water is also going to be bottle b'shishim. What's the halacha? B'yamin, you said yes. What does everyone else say? Anyone have any other solutions or options for teretz to my question? Did it do that or not? Any other attempts? The short answer is it's a machloikis, Rashbam and Ri. That's the machloikis in Tosfos. That is the machloikis in the Tosfos Cholav Maimuter Cholav Nevelu on top of the page. The Rashbam holds like Binyamin. The Rashbam says that it did transform the whole water to become mamish treifa water, and if this water falls into other water, it's never going to be bottle afilu be'elef.
Forever and ever, so not any time.
Yeah.
Ein will never say.
Throw it in the garbage at some point. Yeah, of course. I mean, you could ask the same question anytime. If there's no shishim, it's also going to be forever and ever, by the way. If Isra falls into 40, and that falls into another less than 2,400, and that falls into less than 24,000, and that falls, every time. Yeah, it's going to go forever and ever, of course. It's not only a question of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, it's even be'elef, and here it's shishim. But if it's less than shishim, the shishim is always growing, because it got bigger and bigger and bigger. It's also forever. Yeah. Yesh soif when you have shishim. Okay. So the Rashbam says, and Hochinami, like B'yam and Tainus, that once the Isra falls into the water, it transforms the water mamish, that if the water falls into other water, it's going to be min b'minoi and never bottle. Correct? That's why the Rashbam came up with an interesting problem. Now, this is a Maimer HaMuzgar, side point I'm saying now. The Rashbam came up with an interesting problem. So according to the Yehuda, when a piece of chazer falls into water and is shishim, it should still be aser. Because a little bit of water goes in, becomes nevela, and makes a U-turn and asers all the water. Because that water became what, according to the Rashbam? Real treifa water, independently treifa water, and now it's again min b'minoi. The Rashbam take holds like that. The only way it'll be mutter is if you have another bunch of chatichas to be mevatel, this water, take. Or you took it out when it was still bubbling, right? That's what the Gemara answers. Otherwise, take. According to the Rashbam, if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, right? Yeah, hold like Rabbi Yehuda, and a piece of chazer falls into water, even if you have shishim, and it's not bubbling, but it's hot, it's treif. Forever. Fill a be'elef lei bottle, it's min b'minoi. You understand? That's what the Rashbam holds. Likewise, this doesn't matter to us. Why? Because we don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda. We hold min b'minoi is bottle b'shishim, right? I'll give you a case. Tosfos mentions it, but I'll show you the case. The cheshbon of Isser being bottle b'shishim applies to normal, regular kind of Isurim. Spices has a different cheshbon. What's the cheshbon for spices? Anyone know? How much is that? Me neither. Depends whatever it is. So you go ask a chef. Yeah, I'll tell you how much salt. What's the ratio of salt to heter? Let's assume it's 1,000. I'm picking a number. If you have 999 times the salt, you'll still taste salt. Yeah. When it's 1,000, it's bottle. That's the cheshbon of salt. Yeah. All right. You salted. You have a spoon of salt here, and a drop of blood fell on the salt, and it made the whole salt bloody. Okay? And now the salt, you put it into soup for Shabbos. You put the soup with a drop of blood into your soup for Shabbos. The salt into your soup for Shabbos. Now, according to the Mechaber, or let's say Rabbeinu Ephraim, it doesn't say Chatich Anasas Nevela B'Shari Sudim. What do you need shishim against? Only the blood. That's it. No, that's not a problem. But according to Rabbeinu Tam, that the salt became nevela, suddenly you need shishim for sure against what? Not just the blood, but also? Salt. But what's the shear of salt? 1,000. So now do you need 1,000 or 60? According to the Rashbam, what would you need? 1,000. The salt became treif. The salt is treif for salt. The salt became ch'tich and asas nevela. This is not only if you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, this is according to us as well. If salt that became treif fell into your soup, it's got to have 1,000. Because until 1,000, you're going to taste the salt. And there's blood going with it. Even a drop, sheba drop. Because once you say ch'tich and asas nevela, it transformed the heter to become independently aser. The lashon of the lomdim, they say that this kind of chatich and asas nevela is called chatich and asas nevela be'ichus. Till now we were talking bekamos. The Isra only had this size, and now that it became nevela, the Isra grew bekamos, right? Kamos means the quantity, right? Kamo, how much it grew. But did it really make it a new and independent mitzias? No. But Rashbam says yes. Chatich and asas nevela means that even be'ichus, now it became treifa salt. Now it became treifa water. That's the shita of the Rashbam. The Ri argues, And then he says, no, it's never, the Chachamim never did that. They only said, Chaticha Nasis Nevela Bekamos. They never meant to say that it gets transformed to be an independent Isser by itself. That's not what they meant. According to the Ri, if a Chazer falls into water, and there was no Shishim, it'll be Yehuda, and you take a spoon of water and put it into another bucket of water that has 60 its bottle, even though it's Mayim b'Mayim, because the spoon of Mayim was not inherently Asr. How did it become Asr? Because of the Chazer. Chazer is bottled, so is the water. The Chanan, the Chticha Nasis Nevela, never meant Be'ichus. It never transformed the heter to become independently Asr. To operate on its own. Never meant that. And there's a new klal to state that, and that's the halacha. The klal is, Ein ha-nesar oiser, yoiser min ha-oiser. The nesar can't be stronger than the oiser. In other words, even if the oiser is going with it, it still can't be worse than the oiser. If the oiser would be batel b'shishim, in this case, chazer would be batel b'shishim, so the mayim is also batel b'shishim. Because the klal is, there's no chaticha nasis nevela be'ichus. Only bekamos. Ein ha-nesar oiser, yoiser min ha-oiser. It cannot be worse than the oiser. Therefore, salt that became bloody, according to the Ri, and fell into soup is batel in how much? 60 against the salt. Salt has a cheshbon of 1,000. Yeah, that's only when the salt is inherently osir. Salt that became osir from blood is batel b'shishim. Takashishim against the salt, because the blood grew to the size of the salt, because we hold chaticha nasas nevela bekamus. That's true, MS, yeah? But it's batel b'shishim. So how do you have inherently osir dika salt, by the way? So when do you ever have spices that's inherently treif? Avodah zarah is one option. A neder. If I make a neder that I'm not going to eat salt, right? And that salt falls into my chicken soup, so then I would need 1,000, because your salt is the isur. But salt that was Leia isur, yeah? According to Tosfos, according to the Ri, is going to be batel b'shishim. Takashishim against the whole salt, but it's going to be batel b'shishim. Correct? So now what we did was we added now, according to the Ri, a new klal. You have 3 klalim, 1 fact and 2 halachas. 1 fact is ein isur b'lo heilich mechaticha lechaticha b'lo, right? Second klal is the ein hanesar oiser ela b'makom she'isur atzma yochel leilech. If the oiser doesn't go, it doesn't aser. But if the oiser does go, it's chticha nasas nevela. Some say once it goes, it actually transforms the heter to work independently to be oser. And the second klal, which is the shita of the Ri in Tosfos, is ein hanesar oiser not only ela b'makom she'isur atzma yochel leilech, but even if the oiser is going, but it's never going to be worse than the oiser. Ein hanesar oiser yoiser min oiser. All right, so far so good. Okay. There is one yotzeh min haklal that everyone agrees that the last klal is not true. Regularly, there's a machloikes Rashbam and Ri, I said, right? But there's one place where everyone agrees that the nesar is oiser, yoiser min ha'oiser. Everybody. And that's a Gemara Mefureshes that you all learned, but you didn't necessarily pay enough attention. If you learned the Ran, you for sure hopefully paid attention. If you didn't, you lav dafke paid attention. Here's the problem. What's min b'minoi according to Rabbi Yehuda? Stam. Rabbi Yehuda holds min b'minoi libatel. By the way, what's min b'minoi? A typical case. What's a typical case? A piece of nevela meat fell into kosher meat, right? What's nevela meat? ShopRite, beef. It's the same behemoth. We eat the same beef, hamburgers, the same beef at the goyim meat. Yeah? What's the difference? Ours is shechted, and theirs is not. So it's min b'minoi. It's all the same. It's the same meat. Just one is kosher, one is treif, right? That's a typical min b'minoi. What's a typical min b'sheinei minoi? Piece of nevela falling into water. That's a typical min b'sheinei minoi. Good that Rashbam makes a problem of a U-turn. But typical, if you don't know of the U-turn problems, yeah, the water going in, the water going out, it's a typical min b'sheinei minoi. All right? What's the biggest min b'sheinei minoi that exists in the whole wide world? Basar and Chalav, right? I mean, Basar and Chalav, obviously min b'sheinei minoi. And if there's shishim, obviously what's going to be the din? It's mutter, of course. If tipas Chalav falls on a piece of basar that has 60, it's mutter. Or basar falls into a pot of boiling milk, what's the din? Mutter, obviously, correct? All right. Tipas Chola falls on a chaticha, right? You follow? Tipas Chola falls on a chaticha, and there's no shishim. What's the din of the chaticha? Awesome. Minatayra? For sure. Is it Nasa Devela Minatayra? Also. Basar Bechalav? No machloikis. Everybody holds Basar Bechalav is chaticha Nasa Devela Minatayra. Correct? So far so good? Okay. Now, if you didn't learn any Gemara here, this piece of Basar, according to Rabbi Yehuda, fell into other Basar. Is that min b'minei or min b'sheinei minei? What would you think? Really? I would absolutely, unequivocally say it's min b'sheinei minoi. What's the isur here? What's the isur? Made up of what? And cholav. So how's that min b'minay with other basar? How could basar and chalav be min b'minay with basar? The isur here is not basar, by the way. The isur is what? Basar and chalav. How could basar and chalav be min b'minay with basar? Or likewise, if a piece of cheese was beleya basar, and then the cheese fell into other cheese, how could that be min b'minay? It should be min b'sheinei minay.
The same way it could answer all other pieces.
I did. It could answer because it gives tam. We're talking about Rabbi Yehuda here, who holds min b'minay is never bottle. So you have to start off with min b'minay. You have to make sure that min b'minay. If it gives tam, for sure it's also. I get that. For sure. If it gives tam, you don't have shishim, it's also. I'm talking about if you have 1,000. You're telling me it's not bottle because it's min b'minay. I'm telling you basar bechalav with basar is the biggest min b'sh, not the biggest. It's a min b'sheinei minay. The heter is made up of what? Basar. And the isur is made up of what? Basar and chalav. Correct? Yeah? Okay, now let's learn back the Gemara of Rav right in the beginning. Go back to the Kuf Ches Amud Aleph. We're going to read now Rav differently. Differently than we learned on last week, Thursday. Amar Rav, Kivan Shenosan Tam B'chaticha. You see, the fifth line of the Gemara. Kivan Shenosan Tam B'chaticha. Once the cholav gives tam to the basar, chaticha atzma nasis nevela. Okay? So the way we learned it on Thursday was it's a balabata shavort. Chaticha nasis nevela. So if it falls into water, what do you need shishim against? The whole basar. No, that's not what I was saying. It's true, but that's not what he's really saying. Chaticha atzma nasis nevela. The basar becomes independently osir. And therefore, what he said is kol hachatichas kula mipnei shein mino. Even though basar b'chalav looks like min b'sheinei minoi, because the isur is comprised of, made up of basar and chalav, and that sounds and looks like min b'sheinei minoi with other basar, correct? But since the basar became nevela independently asur, yeah, independently asur, therefore it's considered min b'minoi with the rest of the basar. Just like the Rashbam says about the water. Remember the Rashbam said, Chazer falls into water, take out a spoon of water. Is the water min b'minoi with other water according to the Rashbam and Binyamin's answer in the beginning? Yeah? Yeah? Rav says that by Basar Bechalav, that's for sure. Taisvus argues, the Ri argues by the water and the Chazer. Because the Nevela part of the water is only who decided that? The Chachamim. It's only Midrabanan, it's Shari Surim. The Chachamim could pick and choose, they could do whatever they want. They could have said, like the Rashbam says, the Ri, that they transformed it, and they didn't because he has a raya from the Gemara. How does the Ri hold that it's not? Because he has a raya from our Gemara. But I don't know what they did, right? But basar b'chalav is a clear Gemara mefureshes that once the chalav goes into the basar, it makes the basar independently asur. Once the basar becomes independently asur, what's the din of this basar with the other basar now? What's it called? Min b'minoi. That means the nesar is indeed oiser, yoiser, mina oiser. The original chalav, if it would fall into all the basar, what would be the din? Batal b'shishim. But this basar that became asar and became nevela is now never going to be batal according to Rabbi Yehuda and all the chatichas. So that's one case that everybody agrees that the chaticha nasis nevela will indeed transform and turn the heter independently into its own isur and asur everything else. Correct? Mamish, it's mamish going to asur everything else. Because we're going to say that the neser is oiser yoiser min oiser. Now here's the question. So that's a fact. By Shari Sudim, whether we say the water became independently asur or the salt became independently asur is actually machloikis, Rashbam and Ri. Basar b'chalav is the machloikis. Everybody agrees that according to Rabbi Yehuda, it never matters to us. The only nafkamina to us was the spices, because we don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda, Baruch Hashem, right? But if we would hold like Rabbi Yehuda, basar that became asur from chalav would work independently and asur all the other basar mipnei she'imina. What does that sound like to you? That chaticha nasis nevela did what to the basar? What did it do to the basar? It made it independently asur mamish, correct? What would you paskin now, based on this Gemara the way I taught it to you now? If basar was belei cholav and you put it boiling hot on the table, what's the din? Is the table asur or mutter? Cholav we know is not coming out. Remember why is the cholav not coming out? Because it's beloi roitiv. But the basar, does it have the power to asur the table or not? Of course, right? Because it became, it's not only an entire nevela, it became independently also mamish, that it's even min b'minoi with the other basar according to Rabbi Yehuda. So forget about Rabbi Yehuda, for sure should asur the table, right? But the Gemara on Amud Beis says clearly it doesn't. The Gemara on Amud Beis says very, very clear that if you didn't do anything to this chaticha, since the cholav doesn't come out, it's not going to asur anything else. What in the world? It sounds like a clear state in the two Gemaras. Did the basar become independently osir or not? I taught you Amud Beis first on Thursday, where it's mashma that it's not independently osir, it still needs the chalav to go, because of the klal number 2. That means the basar needs what to go with it? The chalav. Needs the chalav. That happens through the emes. But it needs the chalav, correct? So then why in the world could it be min b'minoi? How could that be min b'minoi? Min b'minoi is basar and basar. Obviously the basar is not independently osir. It also needs the chalav. Is that correct? Yes? So it sounds like from Amud Beis, right? That without chalav, what's going to be the din? And from Amud Aleph is mashma that even without the chalav, once the chalav made the basar osir, what happened to the basar? It became independently osir. Now, if I had to ask you, based on the Gemara we learned now, efshel l'soichtei osir or efshel l'soichtei mutter, how would you pass it? What does efshel l'soichtei mean? If I get out all the milk, it's not possible. Let's say I get out all the milk, what would be the din? Osir or mutter? If the basar is osir independently. Osir. Correct? That's what it would sound like, correct? All right. Everyone turn to Daf Kuf Yud Beis. There's a very interesting Gemara. There's a guy, he likes to roast his flesh. He likes to make a barbecue. The problem is he doesn't have salt, or he just shechted the behemoth and he doesn't want to salt the basar. Now we know that how does dam come out of a piece of basar? There's two ways. Through salt or tzliya, you roast it. So he wants to roast it, okay. Now obviously any juice that comes out, when you roast it without doing salt first, that juice is what? What is it made of? Dam. The problem is he loves the schmaltz. He likes the schmaltz. He loves that schmaltz that comes out. So normally what do you do if you're roasting a piece of basar? What happens to the schmaltz that you're roasting? Goes onto the coal, it gets ruined. But he wants to put a keli, he wants to put on a broiler, and he wants to put a keli under and catch the schmaltz. So what do we tell a guy normally? Wait to the shiur of how much long it takes for the dam to leave, and then put the keli. And then get the schmaltz. I like the first schmaltz. That's the schmaltz that I like. So the Gemara gives a eitzah. The Gemara says, take a keli and put 2 grains of salt. We can't do this because we don't know how big is a grain. What's a grain of salt, right? 2, not 3, and not 1. 2 dafke. We don't know, we're not Baki. But let's assume you're a Baki, you saw Tana do it and Amoyra do it in this Manashas. You 2 grains of salt on the bottom. What's going to happen is when the schmaltz comes down, the salt is going to draw all the blood to itself on bottom. That's what it's going to do. 2 and not 3 and not 1, and very small. The rest is going to be pure schmaltz. So you could take it, you could eat it. That's what the Gemara says you could do. It's called beidugi. That's the code word for that type of keli, that you put 2 grains of salt. And if you put trei gilale milche, 2 krotim, 2 grains of salt, it's fine. Toisus and bottom. Trei gilale the milche, umeshapia. Take a look. Daf Kuf Yud Beis Amud Aleph. You all have the toisus? Okay. Toisus says, why is it mutter if you do that? Shadam nigrar etzra melach b'shulayim. The dam will get drawn to the salt that's in the bottom of the keli, and it will sort of filter out the dam from the schmaltz, and the schmaltz will become mutter. We have a huge problem with that. Don't we paskin efshel l'soichtei osir? Once something is osir, you can't make it mutter. I mean, once the dam came out with the schmaltz, hello, how could you separate it? So Tosfos says, even according to the shit in Daf Kuf Ches that we're learning now, that efshel l'soichtei is osir, yesh lahatir kan. By the salt and the schmaltz, it's mutter. Why? We don't say as soon as the schmaltz comes out, it became osir. Neser machmas dam hamu'urav boy v'shuv lo yoyi lo yitrei gelele milcha. It shouldn't help anymore the salt because it's already treif. No, the kivon shehadam nifrash mimenu legamri ein nishar boy tam afilu mashu. The kach hoyu b'kiyim b'dover, because it really separates all the blood. They knew that. Skip the word hamutter, it's a mistake.
Only if it fully separates.
It does. They knew that it does. They were bucky then, and it does. Today, we're not bucky because we don't know how big and how many and how big is 2, whatever. But me'ikar adin, there is this idea that 2 grains of salt or a certain kind of salt will separate it legamri.
So what was in your bit in the case of the flesh?
When it was finished the Tosfos. Well, they do me left should have soichetoi deleil. The hosam ein ha'isur yoytze legamri eloshem is battle. Okay, then Tosfos says, don't do the salt today because we don't know what we're doing. Okay. Tosfos makes a yisoid here. Let me say the yisoid and then we'll answer your question if I could. If it's a question. Tosfos says, efshel l'soichtei osir never meant that if you get it all out, it'll be osir. It's not true. That's not what the Gemara meant. The Gemara certainly agrees that if you get all the milk out, it's going to be mutter. All of it. You can't do that. You can't kasher food. But Lu Yitzur, you would be able to get all the milk out of your mutter. You know what Efshel Soichte Mutter means, according to those that say Efshel Soichte Mutter? What does it even mean if you can't get it all out? It's very simple. What? That's not, no. Yes and no. No. Yes, but no. And I'll explain what it means. Efshel Mutter means like this. If you have a piece of, let's say, basar that was balei cholav, and then you cook this basar in water, yeah? Now, if you have now shishim in the water, what happened to the milk that was in the original basar? It's not bottled. It spread into the rest of the pot. So how much is left in the original chaticha? A little bit. But now it's bottled b'shishim. Right? But there is a little milk that stayed inside. That's the reason for Efshel Soichte Mutter. Not because all the milk leaves. Not because Efshel Soichte means you got it all out. You follow? Efshel Soichte Mutter means because you got it mostly out, what's left in will be bottled b'shishim. And the other shitta says, no. Once it first gave tam, even if later you get most of it out and whatever's left is going to be bottled b'shishim, it's not bottled anymore once it became asr. That's all Efshel Soichte means, asr means. But if you can get it all out, which is impossible, the only case that I know you could is this story of this salt and the shmaltz, as the Gemara tells us, and it'll be kosher. That's what Tosfos learns pshat in our Gemara. So when I asked you before, what do you think if the basar became independently asr? So if you get all the milk out, is it going to be asr or mutter? You all attacked me and said, correctly, according to your understanding, asr, right? Tosfos says, you're all wrong. It's not true. The Gemara never meant that if you get it all out, it'll be mutter, asr. It's not true. If you get it all out, it'll absolutely be mutter. You just can't get it all out. That's why it's asr. The other shitta says, why is it mutter if you can't get it all out? Because whatever's left is so little that it's bottle b'shishim, right? At the beginning it was nois and tam. Now it's not nois and tam. So for that shitta says Efshel Soichte Mutter, and the other shitta, and that's the halakha, says Efshel Soichte Asr. But no one in his right mind ever thought for a second that if you actually could get all the cholav out, yeah, that it will stay asr. Like why? Like what does it even mean? But Torah said don't eat basar b'cholav, right? So when there's cholav in there, don't eat it. Even if it started off with asering it and now it doesn't have enough to aser, that's it. The Torah said it's aser, it's aser. But if you get it all of it out, kosher.
Why is there a difference if it's bottled if there's nothing there after the
You mean you're really asking me, is it minat Torah when I say Efshel Soichte Aser? That's really what your question is. I can make a big difference. Once something is aser, it's aser. You can't become mutter. Okay, it's a good question. I don't want to waste time with alumnus right now. There's a lot of biurim why Efshel Soichte would be aser even though it's bottled. The Torah actually holds Efshel Soichte mutter, except for Basar Bechalav. But either way, that's what it means, says Tosfos. Kama biurim b'davar, and we'll touch upon them throughout the year.
Like that?
That what?
Efshel Soichte Aser?
If you get it all out?
Yeah.
Why? No, slow down. What does he say that?
I'm saying the idea.
No, I don't know why.
The chatich itself becomes Aser.
Yeah, only when the oyster is with it. Who said that if you take out the Isser completely, the Rashbam, it's actually Hagoas Oshri that says clearly that Rashbam is mated if you take it all out. Clearly. The Rashbam's shit is that if they're going together, it's also Chtichanas Nevele Beichus. So you take it, transformed it independent. We'll get that. I'm going to explain that in a moment. Okay. So now, once you have this Tosfos, what would Tosfos paskin la halacha? If you take a piece of basar that was Belei Cholov and Belei Roitev, you put it on the table. Is the table today for not? What? What's the din? You're not answering the question. You didn't take the cholav out. You put the basar with cholav on the table. What's the din of the table? Why? There's no cholav coming out. Beloy roitiv, I know for a fact cholav is not coming out. Anything. I can't take cholav out, but I know that I could get only heter out. If I have a piece of basar that was belei cholav, and I ask you a question, I'm holding this. This, you see the wick? The wick represents the cholav. That's all in here, and this is the piece of basar. Can I get all the cholav out? Fact? Yes or no? No. Can I get only basar out of this? Yes. Beloy roitiv. Yoreh Navi told us that beloy roitiv, I know for a fact the belua doesn't come out. So now I have a heichatimtze, I have an opportunity to explain, according to everybody, that there is a way to get only basar. I can't actually do it to the chaticha. I can't eat the chaticha because I can't get the cholav out. But I can get only basar out, beloy roitiv. What's going to be the din of the table? It's kosher, it's fleishik. Because the cholav is not coming out. The Gemara said, Efshel Soichte Aser. Yeah, that was about the piece. Because I can't get the cholav out completely. But since I have a heichatimtza to get only basar out, because I have this klal of eina yisr below heilich mechaticha lechaticha below reitiv, the table will be kosher. Okay. So now one thing we see for sure from Tosfos that the Gemara, not Gemara numbered Aleph, not the Gemara numbered Beis, nobody ever had a havamin according to Tosfos. That is that if you get all the chalav out, it would still be osir. There's no such thing. Or as an old Torah, they would say, no such a thing. And it's not correct English. Correct? Am I right? I'm like an old Torah, so I make a lot of mistakes. There's no such a thing, and I had to go. Yeah, that's what they used to say. You follow what I'm saying? There's no such avamina, there's no such svara, that if you get all the cholav out, that it's going to stay osir. Yeah, it's impossible, so that's why it's going to be treif, take. But let's say, hypothetically, scientifically, you ask the Gemara, Rav, if I get all the cholav out with a mic, with whatever, with a laboratory, is it going to be mutter? Of course! It's back to kain vefes, as if the Yisr never happened. Right? So now comes the other question. So why in the world is it ever min b'minoi? If the cholav, the basar sari, needs the cholav, why is it min b'minoi? Then the Rav doesn't make any sense. Rav says it's so much chatich and asas nevera, the basar is independently osir, that it's going to be considered min b'minoi with the rest of the basar. I just finished telling you, no, even this shit holds that without the cholav it's going to be mutter. So why is it min b'minoi? The answer is that what? How's it min b'minoi? The Isser is made up of basar and cholav, falling into heter, which is only basar. That should be min b'shayda minoi. The teretz is, that's the chiddush of Basar Bechalav. It's a huge chiddush. That even though they need each other, the Torah makes it as if they each work independently. The cholav is independent and the Basar is independent. That is the chiddush. That's what Rav said. Even though they need each other, when they're both going, the atzma is working as if it's basar asar, and the cholav is working as if it's basar asar, and it's oiser kol achatich es kula mipnei sheim. It's a huge chiddush. Even though they need each other. So where's the chiddush of Rav? Which statement? Chatich atzma nasas nevela, or eseres kol achatich es kula mipnei sheim. Eseres kol achatich es kula mipnei sheim. That's the huge chiddush. Since it became nevela, I'm adding to you. Yeah. Still, it's oiser mipnei sheim, it's considered min b'minei. Just like the Rashbam says by the chazer and the water. The Rashbam is also moide over there that if you take out the chazer completely, the water will be kosher. But when the chazer is there, I'm telling you, says the Rashbam, the water is min b'minei. How did the Rashbam know that? From Rav. That's what Rav says by Basar Bechalav. Tosfos says, you might have been right. I'm telling you, the Chachamim didn't do it. By Shari Surim, they said the other klal, Eina Neser Oiser Yosem and Oiser, because I have a raya from a Gemara. But Basar Bechalav, that's a clear Gemara. It's a Gemara Mefureshes. It's a Gemara Mefureshes. It's a Gemara Mefureshes. The Chticha Atzman Asas Nevela, and still it's considered a Seres Kol Achtichas Kul Mepnei Sheimino. It's a huge chiddush. That even though they need each other, yet the Basar works independently and the Cholav works independently. Even though they need each other when they're going together. Because if you separate them completely, like Beloy Roitev, it's going to be not only not Nasa Nevela, it's going to be actually kosher if you get all the cholav out, which you can't, but you could get only basar out by the salt and the schmaltz, where you could get it all out in the story of the Gemara. And you could eat the schmaltz. Take, as the schmaltz, you could eat the schmaltz. That's Shittas HaTosfos in this Gemara. Shittas HaTosfos in this Gemara is that basar and cholav, the klal of ein haneser oiser ela b'mokim sho isur atzma yochal leilech applies. Means if the oiser is not going, if the cholav is not going, it will not aser. That's why if you didn't touch the top piece, the Gemara says in the second Omer, it doesn't aser. It's not a problem at all. But if it is going, Rav is mechadish to you that the nesar, which means the basar, is oiser yoisim and oiser. It's worse than the cholav. Cholav would be einemine with the other basar, and this basar is min b'minei with the other basar. And the Rashbam takes it a step further and says, not only by basar b'cholav, the Chachamim did the same trick by Shari Surim too. And Tosfos says, maybe, I'm telling you they didn't, because I have a raya from our Gemara that they didn't. Tosfos is not arguing in svara with the Rashbam. You could say any svara you want. Biyama wasn't wrong when you said yes. There's such a svara. It's just they didn't, because I have a raya from the Gemara. Obviously the Rashbam has a different explanation than the Gemara. All right. So far so good? Comes the Ran. Everything I told you by is the first part of the Ran at length in the name of Tosfos. There's no such Tosfos, but I found you a Tosfos in Daf Kuf Yud Beis, which basically says it in one line, right? Tosfos says what I just told you in one line. Tosfos says because over there you can't get it out completely. That is 50 lines in the Ran. What I just told you now, okay? So obviously the Ran had a different Tosfos because he's quoting a Tosfos, but we don't need that Tosfos to believe him that that's Shittas HaTosfos because it says it in the Kuf Yud Beis by the story with the salt in one line. All right. The Ran, however, himself says this makes no sense. This is kakameni svaras. That if you separate them, then what? Then it's kosher. But when they're together, they each work independently. He says that's no. I'm sorry. He says that doesn't make any sense. One of the two is not emes, or even if you separate it, it's still treif. Or if you need it, then it's not going to be min b'minoi. Since he says it's min b'minoi, he says that on. So must be which din is sheker? The first din. I argue with Tosfos. It's not true. By Basar Bechalav, if you separate the chalav completely, it's still treif. Says that on. It's not true. Correct? That's what he says. You know what Efshel Soichle Osir actually means? Efshel Soichle. Even if you get it all out, every bit of it's still treif. That's why it's min b'minoi. Rav's is not such a big chiddush anymore, by the way. Now let's read Rav. Even if you get the chalav out, well, obviously, then I said every kid will answer you. If I go with a little kid and I say chalav went into chalav, is the basar independently osir or not? What's the kid going to answer? Well, I don't know. What happens if you take out the chalav? That's what the kid will answer. If you tell him it's osir still, oh, of course it's independently osir. Of course it's min b'minoi. So the real chiddush of Rav is not the second half, it's the first half. What do I mean, nasis nevela, says the Ran, even if the cholav leaves completely? Well, naturally, he said, right? Naturally, it'll answer everything else because it's mimimine, because the basar is independently also, correct? That's how the Ran learns this Gemara. So Rav is mechadash, a big chiddush. Right? But it's a different chiddush than we learned till now. We learned, Ran agrees that if the cholav is not there, it's mutter. The chiddush is that when it is there, each one works independently. According to the Ran, the chiddush is that the chaticha atzma means even if you get out the cholav, what's going to be the din of the bazar? It's going to aser. It's still treif. So of course it's min b'minoi. So if I ask the Ran, if a piece of basar was b'leach cholav, boiling hot, put it on the table, what's the din of the table? Treif komor. Even though chalav is not coming out, I don't care. The Ran says the basar really became osir forever, even if you get all the chalav out or only basar out, it's all treif. That's shittas Ran. He doesn't hold that it's klal of ein haneser oiser ella b'mokem she'iser atzma yochal lelich. You don't need the oiser to go. Once something becomes nevela, the Ran argues and says it's treif gomor lo'elam b'od. What's the problem with the Ran? Anyone can tell me what the problem with the Ran is? Not in Svara. Nachamo? He doesn't hold it a klal. He does, yeah, obviously not. Sure not. Well, the second klal of Basar Bechalav was sure not. No, I want a different kasha. It's against the Gemara. The Gemara says in Amud Beis that if you didn't do anything to the piece of basar, mivla bola, miflat loy polit, it doesn't ask it anymore. In Rabbi Yehuda. Now, what are you talking about? The Gemara says befeidish. Chola falls on a piece of basar and you did nothing. What does the Gemara say? What happens to the rest of the pot? Nothing. Kasha. What are I talking about? What was he talking about? When you forgot the Gemara? So the Ran asks the question. You know what he answers? The Gemara didn't mean it. I mean, I'm just paraphrasing in a simple line. The Ran says that was only according to the Havamin and not according to the Baskan. The whole story, he says, it's not true. Fedish does answer. It's just simply not true. This fact that the Gemara says that if you did nothing, it doesn't answer, not true. It does answer. That's how strong the kasha is, by the way. When you have to change the halacha or what it says, that's a big raya that the kasha is a very good kasha. Whenever the Gemara asks a kasha and it says, okay, tni, change the wording. That means it's a very good kasha. The Ran Taka says a very good kasha. He learns the Gemara differently. So the Ran's shit is that this whole cloud that you need the oyster to also go in order to say chatich and asas devela, etc., is not true. Clearly, chatich and asas devela means even if you get the iser completely out, it's going to be osir. So next kasha you have against the Ran is, how does the salt work? Right? Right? It's just a Gemara, you could eat the schmaltz, yeah. So if you wouldn't be the Ran, if you were the Shach, the answer is very simple. The Ran is only correct by Basar Bechalav where it's Minat Torah. B'shari Surim, if you separate it, it's mutter. That's what the Shach would answer you. We'll get to that soon. Right? That's what the Shach would answer you. It's not a problem. It's dam over there. It's blood. Blood is not Basar Bechalav. Blood is Shari Surim. Shari Surim, the klal applies that the Oyser has to go. Basar Bechalav doesn't matter. The problem is that the Ran learns there is not ever a difference between Basar Bechalav and Shari Surim. Period. The Ran says Barichas. Wherever the din by Basar Bechalav is going to be a din of Shari Surim, the Chachamim made no differences. So why by the salt is it going to be okay? So, yeah, that's one answer. Emes. I don't want to use that answer. He's answering because according to the Ran, salt burns the blood. There's no blood left. It's so sharp that it burns the blood. Emes. I want a different answer. If you learn the whole Ran, the Ran learns that you only say Chatich and Asas Devela ever if it's being cooked, like Basar Bechalav. Whenever there's no cooking, there's no Chatich and Asas Devela. Even if the Isser went into the Heter. So according to the Ran, the salt never became Nevela Bechlal. The Schmaltz never became Nevela Bechlal. It's not cooking. It's only roasting. And also, by the way, it doesn't get burnt by fire. It only gets burnt by salt. The question was putting the salt on the bottom. We confused each other. The schmaltz that's coming out, according to the Ran, why is that mutter? What's burning it? The Ran doesn't say tzli burns the dam. He says melach burns the dam. Yeah? The teretz is, because since it's not derech bishul, according to the Ran, the schmaltz never became nevela, so it's not a problem. If you don't say chatich and asas nevela, you can actually separate the blood from the schmaltz. He only says that it became transformed to be independently also only if it became nevela. When does it become nevela? According to the Ran, only like basar bechalav, only derech bishul. Now is not the place and the issue to explain all these details. We'll get to that mitzvah. So the sikum advarim, we have a huge machloikis here, Tosfos and the Ran, whether when an iser leaves the heter completely, is it still nevela or not? In the Shiur on Thursday, we said 100% not nevela. The klal of einan eser oiser ela b'makam b'shizar atzma yochel leilech means if there's no oiser going, there's no chatich and asas nevela. So if a potato was b'leach chazer or a basar was b'leach cholav, you put it on the table's kosher. Tosfos indeed holds like it. The Ran says no, it's not true. What's the halacha? So by shari surim, everybody agrees that the oiser has to go, not like the Ran. So basar that was beleya chazer, let's say, or potato was beleya chazer, and you put it boiling hot on this table. What's the din of the table? It's kosher. Why? Because beloy roitev, what's coming out? Only potato, no chazer. By basar bechalav, there's a clear machlokes shach and taz. It's like a clear machlokes down to Shulchan Aruch and halacha. If you take a piece of basar that was beleya chalav and you put it on this table boiling hot, the taz will hold like Tosfos. The table's fleshig, not treif. Beloy bishul, meaning beloy roitev, eino oiseres. Taz, loshna taz. Eino oiseres. Shach, he holds like that on, by basar b'cholav only. Basar that was beleya cholav that you put boiling hot on this table, according to Shach, table's treif. Because the basar itself is also treif. It doesn't matter for min b'minei for us, if it's min b'minei or not. Why not? Because we don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda anyways. Correct? But by shari surim, yeah, everybody agrees the oyser has to go. And everybody agrees to the Ri also, that even if the oyser is going, it does not transform it to be independently osir. So if salt was belei adam and then you put it in the soup, according to the Rashbam, what are you going to need? 1,000. But according to the Ri, how much do you need? Shishim. Understood?
Why according to the Ran, is the table, why don't we say that the table is like shishim mevatel the...
Why don't we say that the table is shishim? Is it?
Probably.
Okay. I told you how big the table is.
Well, chances are the table's going to be big.
Chances are bigger, 60 times bigger. How big is the basar that I put on this table? By the way, this challah is bottle shishim on the table, Stam. You think there's 60 place for 60 challahs on the table? Maybe, I don't know, you have to check. I mean, why are you so sure?
But if there is, then it would be... Then
No,
it would be fine, right?
also not. But I'm just challenging your question. Because you don't know how bittul b'shishim works, to know if a table is bittul b'shishim.
But if there is shishim on the table...
No, the poil not. There's a din in bittul b'shishim. You can't use a table, you can't use substance, you can't use bliyas that are abstract to be mevatel b'shishim. That's a different halacha. I was challenging you, even the shitascha, that the table could be mevatel b'shishim. Like, why is that a question? Obviously, when I say osir, I mean if there's no shishim. When I tell you Isser falls into heter and asered, what do I mean? If I tell you that statement, automatically you know I mean there's no shishim, right? Because if there's shishim, it will be bottle. Or shishim won't work for whatever reason. So we're going to learn that throughout Shulchan Aruch. Whenever it says something fell into heter and it made it osir, you have to automatically understand what it means. Piro shalei hoya shishim. Say that. So even the shitascha, even if though you think that a table could be mevatel the Isser b'shishim, okay, fine. But who says? I mean, I don't know. This table's big. The tables upstairs are smaller. The pizza and basar could be any size, right? All right.
Also holds the derech bishul part like the Ran?
No.
The chumrah?
No.
So he holds more than the Ran?
No. That the shach.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
kula. The Ran of derech bishel's a kula. The Ran's derech bishel's a huge kula.
Chumrah like the Ran.
No, he holds that you say chtich and asavila anywhere by basar b'chalav, even not derech bishel, and then he takes the Ran's chumrah that the basar without the chalav will also aser.
Okay, so Basar Bechalav, not derech bishul.
Also is chtich and asavila. We hold. Behef but the shach is actually mekel. Whatever. There's so many details. Shach, you don't remember where it is, right? Okay, but you should. David, you remember where it is? Where is the shach? Simet Tzadik Beis of Cotton Tesavov. Just so you know. All right. That's where it is. It's right at the end of Siv Dalet. Did you say Siv Dalet? What did you say? No, it's Simit Tzadik Bey Siv Dalet. That's where it is. Okay. That's where the Shach sort of behefs but the reason why he says that is for a different reason. Because there are poskim that say Malich is only Yisik and they clip even B'Shamein. It's for a different reason. Okay. So far, so good. Now, by the way, we only have 7 minutes left. I'm going to just show you something very interesting over here. And then we're going to look at Shulchan Aruch tomorrow. The raya of the Ri, that you don't say that the water gets transformed to be independently osir. Anyone remember what the raya was? I'll tell you what the raya was. Brings a raya. The Gemara said, how come Rav says the milk is mutter? Isn't there a U-turn? So what did the Gemara answer for a second? In the Havamina? The Torah never asked milk. The Torah only asked basar. Stam, I'm going to ask you guys a simple question. If you take a hold, the Torah only asked the basar and not the milk, so what is the milk as if? It's like water, right? How could you still drink the water? If chazer falls into water, can you drink the water? No way. Minat Torah, you can't drink the water. If you hold tam ki ikar deiraisa, forget about chtichanas the vela, right? You can't drink the water, right? Minat Torah. So even if the Torah said that the chalav is still mutter, bottom line is if basar falls into chalav, can you drink the milk? Not because the milk is inherently osir. Why is the milk osir? Because in the milk there is tam of the basar. So you still can't drink the milk. So what did the Gemara gain by answering the story? It's still same U-turn. According to the Rashbam, the chalav goes in, also becomes nevela, and it becomes independently osir, makes a U-turn, and it's again min b'minit. What did the Gemara answer? This is taina the Rashbam. According to you, it doesn't make any sense. The Gemara didn't gain anything. There's still the same U-turn, just midrabanan, not midrabanan. That's a nevela. Earlier it was midrabanan, and now it's midrabanan. So what's they say? Must be the Chachamim never went that far. That's all Taisva says. That from the teretz of the Gemara has to be that the milk is osir to eat, correct? A little bit that goes in, right? And why is it okay even though there's a U-turn? Because the Chachamim never went that far to say that the basar became mamish independently osir. That's his taina to the Rashbam. Everyone look at Rashi and Daf Kuf Ches Amud Beis. Rashi answers the question with two lines. The whole yisoid of Tosfos' kasha was that you can't drink the milk. That's for sure, right? Look at Rashi. The last of the first wide lines on top. Va'afilu cholov muter. Va'afilu hoya bebasar shir godoil loseis tam b'chol hacholov. No, actually you could drink the milk even if it tastes like basar. That's how he answered for the Rashbam. Who was the Rashbam? It was Rashi's grandchild. So the Rashbam apparently was going with Rashi's shitta, right? And he looks at Rashi and Tosfos says, you mislearned the whole Gemara. You decided that the cholav is still osir, so you made a whole pilpul if the cholav is osir, so then what did you gain? The U-turn still happens. Must be the Chachamim never went that far. Stop! The cholav is kosher. That's all Rashi says. The cholav is kosher. The problem is, that Ran quotes this svara and says, hello, why? What kind of svara, what world did Rashi live in to say that the cholav is going to be mutter to eat if there's tam basar inside it? Okay, however Rashi is going to answer is a different conversation, correct? But one thing's for certain, Rashi is addressing Tosfos' kasha for the Rashbam, for his grandchild. To answer this kasha of Tosfos, that the cholav is anyways osir, so all Rashi is answering, sheker, the cholav is mutter. The Ran gives a different answer for the Rashbam. And Achanami, at this point in the Gemara, liquid doesn't become nevela. What's so terrible? And there's this that the Rashbam said that the water that goes into the basar and makes a U-turn is nevela. That's only according to the Maskonos of Gemara. At this point in the Gemara, liquid that never becomes nevela. So therefore, it's not min b'minoi. At this point, that's what he answers. Balabat sheteretz. But Rashi sort of pulls the rug off the whole kasha, right? So there was a book. I have a few terutzim with 4 minutes. I'll give you one teretz to explain what is Rashi saying. Why is it mutter? So I have my own beer, but it's going to take too long. But there was a bocher here. He lives here in Marston. It's Shmuley Brafman. I'll mention his name. I have to remember his beer. He came up with an interesting teretz. He says like this. Those that say tam ki ikar min atayra, shittas atayisvis, where do you learn it from? That all Yisurim, no, that's shishim. How do you know tam ki ikar? Ba'alma. Where does Abaye learn it from? Basar Bechalav. Torah says Basar Bechalav is osir. Yeah? That means tam ki ikar. From which part of the basar and the chalav are we learning from? The chalav that goes into basar or basar goes into chalav? Well, chalav into basar, says the Rashba, that's not tam. What's that? That's ikar. You're eating basar mamish with chalav mamish. So where do you have a proof that tam alone karaser when basar falls into chalav? Correct? When basar falls into chalav, that's the source that the Torah cares about tam. Because when tipas chalav falls on basar, there's no proof that the Torah cares about tam. Because what are you actually eating? Iker, you're eating Iker Basar, Iker Chalav. It's like eating a piece of cheese. It's salami and cheese. So where is the raya from Abaye? When Abaye said you learn from Basar Bechalav, Tam Kika Deraisa, says the Rashba, it's from the Basar going into the Chalav, yeah? Held cup here, yeah? If the Torah is Gedi Asra Torah V'loi Chalav, there's no Tam Kika. Right? So if there's no Tam Kika, you could actually drink the milk. There's no Tam Kika. Right? Push it. It pulls the whole rug of Tam Kika. You're allowed to drink the milk. That's why Rashi says at this point in the Teretz of the Gemara, you're allowed to drink the milk. Because the whole Yesoid of Tam Kika comes from Basar Bechalav. When the Basar gives Tam into the Chalav, at this point in the Gemara, K'di Yasr Torah V'lei Chalav, right? So the Torah didn't answer the Chalav, so there's no Tam Kika, so you talk about eat it. Min HaTorah. According to this half minute of the Gemara. Once the Gemara changes and says, no, it's not true. That's now how we learn. According to Abaye, Tam Kika, Min HaTorah everywhere. Actually, Rashi disagrees. He holds like Rava. But whatever. But at the half minute of the Gemara, there's no Tam Kika anymore. According to this our Gemara here, that the limud is from Basar Bechalav, not from other places, right? That's what he answered. That's why Rashi says you could actually drink the milk. And at this point, enochanami. If chazer falls into water, what's the din in HaTorah? You could drink the water. Because there's no source for Tam Kiyike. Once we know that the Chalav is also Aser, now we have a source for Tam Kiyike. Understood? This is just extra lumdas, not negay. If you don't know this last piece, it doesn't matter. All right, we got a lot of you say this over here enough. Now we're starting Shulchan Aruch and Mitzvah Shem tomorrow. So there'll be a Shiur Hakdama tomorrow in Shulchan Aruch, and the fun begins.